On July 20th, 1944, a one-eyed, one-handed German officer by the name of Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg entered a wooden hut at Adolf Hitler's Wolfslair headquarters in eastern Prussia and placed a briefcase at the base of a map table where Hitler was standing. The case contained a bomb, one of two that von Stauffenberg had brought with him. Due to time pressure, however, the colonel could only arm one device before the meeting took place. Unfortunately, a general who was present moved the case further away from Hitler, placing it behind a thick piece of wood that supported the table. The wood absorbed much of the blast, and Hitler escaped with some cuts and bruises when the bomb exploded. There are so many what-ifs about that day. What if the second bomb had been planted? What if the bomb had not been moved? What if the meeting had been held where it was originally intended, in a concrete bunker? The concrete would not have dissipated the force of the blast the way the wooden hut did, and so would have proved lethal to all inside. The failure of both the assassination and the military coup d'etat that was planned to follow it led to the execution of almost 5,000 people, resulting in the destruction of the organised resistance movement in Germany. It would not be until April 1945 that the world would finally be rid of the Nazi dictator, when he eventually committed suicide. People might bemoan that lost opportunity to be rid of the monster that was Hitler, but there were plus chances down the years. Read them and weep. Carlo man Michael Keogh probably tormented himself until his death in 1964 because back in the spring of 1919 he actually saved Hitler from being ripped apart by a mob. Keogh, an ardent Republican, had enlisted in the British Army in 1913. He became a POW during the war, joined the Irish Brigade, and then later enlisted in the German Army as he felt that the Germans could advance the Republican cause in Ireland. He rose to the rank of Field Lieutenant. In his regiment, he met a certain Lance Corporal called Adolf Hitler. After the war, Keogh joined the Freikorps, an early fascist organisation sworn to smash communism. He was duty officer at a Munich barracks when he was called to quell a riot that had erupted in a nearby gym. When he got there, a crowd of some 200 soldiers were busy beating two men to a pulp. Some of the attackers held bayonets, and it seemed to Keogh that the two victims were about to die. He ordered his men to fire a volley over the heads of the mob. The crowd dispersed, and Keogh managed to drag the two victims out of the gym, cut, bleeding, and in need of the doctor. Keogh later recalled, "The fellow with the moustache gave his name as Adolf Hitler. It was the Lance Corporal of Linie. I would not have recognised him. He was thin and emaciated from his wounds." After the war, Keogh would say, "If we'd been a few minutes later, or Hitler had got a few more kicks to his old wounds, or he'd been shot, what would have happened if we hadn't intervened and he'd died?" What if indeed? On September 28, 1918, Private Henry Tandy, a British soldier serving with the 5th Duke of Wellington Regiment near the French village of Marcoing, reportedly encountered a wounded German soldier and decided not to shoot him. Tandy, a native of Warwickshire, was actually awarded a Victoria Cross for conspicuous bravery during the action to capture Marcoing. He later told sources that in the final moments of that battle, as the German troops were in retreat, a wounded German soldier entered Tandy's line of fire. "I took aim, but couldn't shoot a wounded man," Tandy remembered. "So I let him go." The German soldier nodded in thanks and disappeared. A photograph that appeared in London newspapers of Tandy carrying a wounded soldier at Ypres in 1914 was later portrayed on canvas in a painting by the Italian artist Fortunino Matania. It is said that when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain went to Germany in 1938 to engage Hitler in a last-ditch effort to avoid war, he was taken by the Führer to his country retreat in Bavaria. There, Hitler showed Chamberlain his copy of the Matania painting, commenting, "That's the man who nearly shot me." The authenticity of the Tandy-Hitler encounter remains in dispute, though evidence does suggest that Hitler did have a reproduction of the Matania painting as early as 1937. On returning to England, Chamberlain contacted Tandy. Tandy would later tell a journalist, "If only I had known what he would turn out to be. When I saw all the people, the women and the children that he had killed and wounded, I was sorry to God I let him go." The evidence is somewhat sketchy, it must be said. The destruction of military records makes it impossible to clarify the exact location of Hitler on the 28th of September 1918, though Hitler's regiment was in the region of Marcoing at the time of the alleged encounter. Otto Wagner, a major general and one-time economic advisor to Hitler, wrote in his memoirs that the future dictator of Germany was almost killed in a car accident on March 13, 1930. Wagner was a passenger in Hitler's Mercedes at the time. A heavy trailer truck collided with the vehicle, but the driver hit the brake quickly enough to avoid crushing the car. The insurance claim signed by Hitler was sold on eBay in 2000. If that truck had braked 1 second later, well, who knows? A Nazi Party tradition was its annual meeting at the Bürgerbraukeller in Munich to celebrate the anniversary of the beer hall putsch of November 8, 1923. Georg Elser, a carpenter by trade and a communist sympathiser, used the event as the perfect place to try to assassinate Hitler. He built a time bomb with which he travelled to Munich in the weeks preceding Hitler's anniversary speech. Elser managed to stay inside the closing hours each night for over a month, during which time he hollowed out the pillar behind the speaker's rostrum and placed the bomb inside. Hitler would usually speak to the party faithful at length, but in 1939 he was forced to begin his speech earlier than expected in order to return to Berlin by train. Fog had closed Munich airport, from which he had planned to fly. The Nazi leader started his speech half an hour earlier than planned. Had he not done so, he would not have left the cellar at 9:07 p.m, but would have been blown to bits by the bomb that exploded at 9:20 p.m, killing 8 people and wounding over 60 others. Elser had by this time been apprehended as a suspected smuggler while attempting to cross into Switzerland. The contents of his knapsack, including a postcard of the beer cellar, aroused suspicion. He initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed after several witnesses identified him as being a frequent visitor to the cellar. Elser was murdered in Dachau concentration camp on April 9, 1945, just weeks before the end of the war in Europe. Britain's Special Operations Executive, the SOE, had extensive experience of derailing trains using explosives. They planned to murder Hitler on his personal train. However, the plot was dropped because Hitler's schedule was too irregular and unpredictable. Stations were only informed of his arrival a few minutes beforehand. Another plan was to put some tasteless but lethal poison in the drinking water supply on Hitler's train. However, this plan was considered too complicated because of the need for an inside person. Through a captured prisoner who had been part of Hitler's guard at the Berghof, British intelligence learned that the Führer liked to take a 20-minute walk every day at around the same time. Hitler liked to be left alone during this walk, leaving him unprotected as he passed by some woods, out of sight of sentry posts. When Hitler was at the Berghof, a Nazi flag was flown and was visible from the nearby town. The scheme called for the SOE to parachute a German-speaking Pole and a British sniper into the area surrounding the compound. Wearing German army uniforms, the men would infiltrate the Berghof before moving to a spot where they were concealed, were within effective rifle range, and had a good view of the path used by Hitler. A sniper was recruited and practiced by firing at moving dummy targets with a standard-issue German army rifle, under conditions which simulated the actual assassination. An inside person was also found who lived in Salzburg, 20 kilometers from the Berghof. The plan was submitted for consideration in November 1944, but was never carried out because controversy remained over whether it was actually a good idea to kill Hitler. His poor attempts as a strategist meant that he was more of a help than a hindrance to the Allies. It was felt that whoever replaced him would probably do a better job of fighting the war. 7 lost chances to kill a monster. Hitler had the devil's own luck, but luck runs out in the end. It's just a pity it took so long in his case. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to the